Alright guys, so today I'm going to show you how I turned this table that I picked up for $5 at Goodwill into this amazing Hookah illuminated turntable. Fun. Okay guys, so what we're going to do first of all in this kit, tell you the master plan here. We're going to take this $5 table we picked up at Goodwill, and underneath in here we're going to insert a Lazy Susan bearing, so the whole table is going to turn, the entire top of it. And in the center we're going to have a string of LED lights, plain white, that are going to illuminate our hookah. And the idea of this is not going to be an RGB, it's going to be a very simple setup. We're going to have a battery in here with its own switch, so we don't need any buttons, extra wires. It's a very, very simple, very cheap setup. It's going to make every hookah look great. The first step, we need to detach our single peg stand here from the tabletop. Okay? So we're going to do that right now and get, you can see here there's the platform and then the tabletop. We're going to take the platform and stand off and work on the tabletop only. Okay, so now that we've got the tabletop off, what we need to do is find our center point. Now the easiest way to do that with any relatively square table is just to draw corner-to-corner lines. So we need to mark a circle here for our Lazy Susan bearing. It's 4.5 inches on the inner diameter, which means we need 2 1/4 inches on our compass. Go from center point right there. And doesn't really matter how dark that is. All we're using that for is a guide later. Okay, so what should happen now, we put this on here, and that circle will fit just inside our Lazy Susan bearing. And actually this is a hair larger than 4.5, so we're pretty good right there. But like I said, it's not going to matter. Alright, so we've got our whole guide for our Lazy Susan done. And what you want to do is make sure that the Lazy Susan bearing is going to have a top and a bottom. And those terms are completely irrelevant the way we're using it, because we're not doing this the way the Lazy Susans are typically built. What you need to do when you're doing this is make sure that the side of the bracket that has the widest and largest holes is on your tabletop. Alright, because what we're going to do eventually, we're going to take this bearing, it's not going to be secured to here, we're going to secure it to the base of our stand, which you can see this broke, we'll fix that in a moment, it's used, it's old. We're going to secure it there and have a guide hole, then we'll put the stand back on top and we'll go through that hole, like come up, and so we'll be coming through and then securing the tabletop later. So you want to make sure you have the most clearance from the bearing center and you have the widest hole to work with. What we're going to do before that is we're actually going to mount this to the tabletop, okay guys, and then we'll unmount it. And then later when we're going back, we'll actually have holes already drilled out for us to make this a lot easier. It'll help us get centered. Okay, so what we're going to do now, guys, we're going to go ahead and mount our bearing to our tabletop, even though it's not going to stay. And what I'll do before I do that, I'm going to make sure I look as center as I can be, like that. Draw my circles for my hole marks, because this will move on you sometimes, and well, that's frustrating. Alright, now we're just going to screw it in. Okay, so now let's go ahead and just screw our... Okay, so now we've got our holes all drilled out effectively for our bearing. We're going to take it off. The next thing we need to do, set that aside. We're going to drill out at the center point the 2-inch hole for our grommet that is going to be the finishing surface on the top. Okay? Okay, so we can see here we got the hole cut right now. Sawdust all over us, that's fun. On this side, came out pretty clean, which is nice. And we want to make sure is that this is actually going to fit. And there, which it does. And this will all come out, all these pieces. This is actually for a desk. What we need to do now is mount the lights inside the grommet. The way I want to do this one is I'm actually going to coil this around in the center. Like so. These are really stiff. And these are fully waterproof. So this is going to sit inside here like that once I get it coiled tightly enough. And I'm just going to use dots of super glue to hold it in place. So it should be relatively simple, and actually what's going to happen, the wired end is going to be in the center. So I flipped it upside down. I'm just going to start like this. Put a dab of glue. And super glue and this kind of waterproofing silicone using the LEDs bonds like no one's business. So be careful you don't get this on your skin while you're doing it. I've done that a few times and regretted it. Okay, so now we've got our LEDs strung in here, and what we've done is I've used a lot of this glue. Jason will zoom in for me a little bit. Use a lot of glue on the seams here between the edges to hold it in place. And I couldn't quite fit it. You don't want to put too much tension on this, so I popped it up a level, brought it back up as an extra ring, and glued it here so it's an anchor point. So this should not come unraveled. You flip it over. May not be the prettiest thing in the world, but no one's going to see that. This light's going to be so bright in your eyes, no one's going to be looking at it. All we wanted to do is make sure that our lights were going to be shining up. Alright, so our lights are all wired, ready to go. We've tested them, we know they work. We've glued and bonded it so it's not going to come out on us. May not be the prettiest thing, but when the lights are on you won't be able to tell. We're done with the LEDs for a few minutes, so we'll just go ahead and set those aside. The next step, we need to mount our Lazy Susan bearing to our stand. So let's get to work on that. I'm going to set my tabletop aside for a moment. Okay, so our base is put back together for the most part. We're going to go ahead and mark center for our bearing. So same thing we always do. We're just, this is the easiest way to find center on a square, corner to corner, crosshairs, meet. You don't have to trace the whole thing. All you're worried about is the center point. And I do love my sawed-off yardstick. This thing's nice. So I don't have to care about it. Okay, so there's my center point. Our protractor, excuse me, our compass should still be set from the top, so we're going to do the exact same thing here. Get into there and trace our circle. Whoops. Of course, this is slightly uneven now. And you have like wood glue and things in here that are going to make the surface a little bit rougher. Don't worry about it, just do your best. Okay, there's our outline. And remember, the wider of the holes are going up. Even though we had them down earlier, they're on the tabletop. So it means the smaller holes are going to go face down on this one. And we're going to do the same thing, line this up the best we can. And secure our Lazy Susan bearing to the platform top of our table stand. Okay, so our bearing is now secured to our stand top. What we need to do now is drill a 1/4-inch hole to allow our screwdriver to pass through and attach the table top, if that makes sense. Easiest way to do it, turn your bearing into a star shape, come over here, and mark your hole, and mark the spot where the holes line up. There's our mark. We're going to drill out a 1/4-inch. So we'll support that. Okay, so there's our access hole. Alright, so we're 90% done now, guys. We've got our Lazy Susan attached to our stand, our bearing. We've got all our guide holes done. We've got our center, and we've got our lights completed. The next thing we need to do before we go any further, before we attach it, is run our wires, make sure they're out of the way. So what I'll do, just feed the wire through, drop my grommet in. And there's a 1,000,001 ways to do this. All we're worried about is that we're not going to be through a screw hole where the bearing is going to attach. And I'm just going to staple this using some simple staple gun. I'm going to bring it out to this edge where I'm going to hide my battery. I've got plenty of slack to run it if I need to. I'm just going to, without puncturing the wires, staple. So these are out of the way. So with our lights attached, our wires run out of the way, making sure they're not over holes. The next thing we need to do is mount our stand back to the tabletop. We're going to line up our hole, our access hole, with one of the screw holes on our bearing, and then we're going to line this hole up with, we're going to pick a corner and line it up. I'm going that one, I think. And we'll just only screw this in about halfway, if that. This isn't really that hard to do, this first one. Because you can actually see it pretty well from the side. Okay, we do that, we're going to screw this one in, then we're going to turn it square, and attach the rest. When we get them all attached nicely, we are going to be done. And drop my screw. Okay, so we've got our bearing all attached to stand, our wiring run. What we need to do next is attach our battery, okay? There's a lot of ways you can do this. You can buy plastic brackets, all that kind of stuff. The cheapest thing to do, I use these little pipe clamps that they sell anywhere in the world. I think this is a 3/4 inch. And what we're going to do is we're going to bend it out slightly. Then we're going to take our adhesive, one-side adhesive foam, put that on here, we're good to go. So we've got our bracket ready to go, a little bit of foam, that's just to hold it. The next thing we need to do is position our battery. And now with it positioned, switch where we want it, everything looking good, we go ahead and just secure it. A stapler, secure this so we don't have anything visibly hanging. And if you watched our video on how to make the battery operated table, there is a tutorial on what to do with this, using our DC jack inputs so that it's, when you plug it in later, you just kind of plug it into the table, not into wires, which is kind of cool. Not necessary, but cool. So now that we have our table all assembled, our nice white soft, our cool white lights in there, like you see that's plenty of light. Actually, I'm going to grab the hose from Jason if he wants to hit the light switch. And there it is. And if I need to, I don't know, hand it to my friend who's visiting on the other side of the couch, there you are, buddy. You have a fully functional hookah table with a light. Ta-da!